Welcome to another episode of Chaos to Clarity, where I interview leaders of some of the world's best tech companies about the strategies and principles that it takes to build a successful business. If you want to find more episodes or free resources to help you grow your business, just go to chaostoclarity.io. All right, I am here with Ryan Rusnak, CTO and co-founder of Airspace. How you doing today, man?
Great, man. How are you?
Awesome. So glad to have you on the show. We go way back, in the CTO community here in San Diego, and I'm really happy to get to interview you because I'm trying to bring the San Diego success stories to light, and you're obviously one of them. So really appreciate having you here.
Thanks. I think you were one of the first fellow technologists I met in San Diego.
Is that right? Oh,
Yeah,
there
one
you
of the
go.
first
I've
ones.
been here a while, 20 years now since I came from the East Coast, but yeah, it's home. Yeah, and today's going to be a good conversation. It's going to be a little weird because we're going to talk about how to turn dead bodies into $100 million business. So
Not
this will
just
be
not just that.
well, we'll find out what else. But the market and shipping of organs is definitely a unique story and one I definitely want to dig into. But I'd love to just hear your journey and your background and what ultimately led you to founding Airspace.
Oh man, my background's kind of long. I'll give you a quick primer on
All right,
airspace
make it
so
short,
so
make
we
it
can get that
snappy.
out of the way. Yeah, the primer on airspace is we're time critical freight forwarder. We say we're tech enabled because historically all the companies in this space they just kind of try harder. They mess up for the same reasons everybody else messes up. They write a new SOP and they just have their people try harder. That doesn't work.
Hmm.
So our ethos is that if you write technology around these problems, you write tech to help the people do a better job, then you have a much higher degree of success, much better patient outcomes. To what you said earlier, we do organs for transplants, we do tissue for surgical tissue, we do med device installations. So lots of things that have to be there at a very specific time. But we also do parts for downed airplanes, down in manufacturing lines, fix supply chains, all that good stuff. So anything, if you're losing money by the minute or it's going to impact someone's life, that's where our sweet spot is. So how I got into that, I was writing lots of tech for the federal government mostly all throughout my 20s. And I was always the most motivated guy in the room. No one, I don't know, spoiler for all the listeners, no one at the federal government really works hard. And, and it's because they don't care. There's no ownership. And I was the guy that was just always like psyched about, maybe that's just who I am. I was just psyched about the project and trying to get done. And they've already had 30 different projects killed for bureaucracy.
Hmm.
And I was sick of being the only guy that actually cared. So
Hmm.
I needed something that was meaningful to get out of bed every day, and some of those projects maybe were. But I ended up meeting Nick, co-founder of Airspace, and he was in this space and was telling me about how organ transplantation you might be on the table, under anesthesia, and then the logistics fail, the organ doesn't show,
Hmm.
and then you get woken up without having an organ that you need. And that crushed me just hearing that. And I was like, man, if I can even help that a little bit, that seems like a really great way to spend time on this planet.
Wow. So you're saying somebody would go in for like a kidney transplant, they would get them dressed up, they'd put them on the operating table, they'd put them under anesthesia, and the organ wouldn't show up?
Right. Yeah. So the
Oh my
doctor's
gosh.
trying to they're trying to close the white space and they're trying to minimize the amount of time that organ is not in someone's body. Right. So
Hmm.
they're trying to
Hmm.
like, get you to go to sleep as that thing is arriving. And they'll take the original quoted delivery time and they'll work off of that. But then the driver gets stuck in traffic, and now they've got this horrible situation. Do you keep the person under anesthesia and potentially cause harm to them,
Hmm.
or do you wake them up, give it to someone else, send it to research, etc.? So
Oh my
these are
gosh.
really really hard problems, that these
Yeah.
guys have to deal with. So we get to help make that better, which feels good.
So how was this done before Airspace? Was it, they would throw it on the UPS truck and just hope that it gets there?
It was done by similar companies, just with no tech. So like they were just think a big call center with like paper everywhere, and then the papers have ledgers of where someone said they are. So it's just um, a doctor says, "Hey, we got an organ, it's got to go." They then get on the phone, call these courier companies in each city, And they say, no, I can't do it. No, I can't do it. No, I can't do it. Finally, you get someone to say yes. And they say, okay. And then they call the hospital and say, we got somebody. And then they're just writing this stuff down. They say, what time's it going to arrive? And they're like, let me call you back. Then they call the courier. And they're like, I think this time. Then they book the flight. Then they book the other courier. And it's just this horrible game of telephone.
Wow. So you're so basically, an organ can be anywhere in the country, right? And it is it flown by airplane to wherever it needs to go?
It
And all
depends.
that
So,
has to be managed logistically?
yep. Ideally, it's intra-city. Ideally, it's same city. So, like the history of like organ transplantation, if we're gonna like just focus on that use case, they had to be in the same room, right, for a long time. It was like in the 70s, I think they had to be in the same room, and then they expanded a little bit to like different hospitals, same city, and then they got all the perfusion devices got good enough that those devices that keep the organs healthy, or just the icing around it,
Yeah.
all got good enough where they could actually do it between cities. And now we do it between cities that are actually kind of far away. So
Wow.
you
How
can
long can a organ survive out of the body?
it really depends. A kidney can last quite a while because now they like bathe it in this really fancy fluid to keep it healthy, and they ice it appropriately. Other organs they put on these pumps to make sure that they stay as healthy as possible in transit. But the shorter it's out of the body, the more likely it will last a long time in the recipient.
Oh, wow. So minutes matter, obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
minutes, in a weird way, if we, like, were to save a delay, let's say the airline messes up and then we proactively fix it and minimize that delay, we actually could have added years to that person's life. So just this
Wow.
past week, we called Southwest and convinced them to turn a plane around because they left the package. Yeah. And by the way, it made it, and that person got a kidney because of it.
Wait, so are these just being sent on commercial aircraft?
Almost all of them. So we do charters as well, but
Yeah.
almost like the vast majority will go on commercial aircraft. Now it depends. So some, like Hearts, for instance, they travel with a whole surgical team on a charter, but that's like kidneys travel on commercial.
So when you're flying on a Southwest flight around the US, there's most likely some organs on there destined for
Yeah,
transplant. Wow.
yeah, and there's very likely tissue. So for instance, like cryogenically frozen veins from like a leg that is maybe going to go into like a heart bypass the next day. That's very likely.
Oh my gosh. It's crazy what's
It's
going
crazy,
on
yeah.
underneath.
Yeah. I I,
Wow.
I'm not, like, the least squeamish, like,
Mhm.
so I get the luxury of looking at these things as database records, but when
Mhm.
you realize exactly what you're dealing with, it really wakes you up and realize, you realize that the world is a crazy place.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, talk about raising the stakes when there's a bug or any downtime in production.
Yeah. Yeah, it really, like, do you know, like, the Edward Shackleton story? Did you ever read that book, Endurance?
Yeah, yeah.
It's one of my favorite books. I love it. Do you remember the poster that he put, which was like, chance of failure high, chance of death high, and like it it kind of self-selected for only these people that like want the pressure.
Mhm.
That's exactly where we're at. Like we are very upfront with people, and some people are like, nope, like I'd rather work for Facebook, where like if your newsfeed crashes, it doesn't matter. But like a lot of the people here are like, they're like, give me the ball. I want to run with
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
Like I want that pressure. I want to do something that matters. I want success. I want failure. I want all of it. So it's a cool culture.
Wow. Yeah, my out of college, I worked at Raytheon for a few years, and I love video games. I've always been a gamer my whole life, and what we were working on was basically an arcade cabinet. It was an arcade cabinet that would go on these warships, and it was kind of a radar array. So it had the map, and it had all the little icons for planes and ships and tanks and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a video game. And so I'm sitting here working on this thing thinking it's basically like I'm building a video game cabinet. But then you realize that every single one of those little blips are people in war machines.
Wow.
And if there's any bug, and what it does, it brings in all of these different sensors and all the different, array, but whether radar, sonar, and across you know, like the whole battlefield, right? So there's, ships and there's planes, reconnaissance, all of these things. They're all sending back signals, and then basically there's this big server that kind of cross references and deduplicates and so on to say, okay, this is like the whole view of the battlefield. And it took me a while to kind of realize that, but I remember that epiphany of like, oh, if we mess up, like people are going to die.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's how you know you're doing something that matters to the world, right?
Yeah. Wow. Um, so tell me about the kind of the growth journey of Airspace. So you started off, it sounded like like your co-founder and you had some experience in this place, but how did you penetrate the market and ultimately take over?
Man, yeah, some of these stories are crazy. So we get to the point, we write the MVP, and we did an absurdly short amount of time, just to see
Mhm.
if this would work. We did like 6 months ish. So we started in like June. Now it's January, and we're like, okay, let's go see if this will work. So we were going to these different companies. I remember going to this really large logistics company who had a whole room of people whose job was to do time critical. And a big aspect of this is routing. So you've got, let's say, an organ or a part of a downed aircraft that's got to go cross country. Let's say it's somewhere in Southern California. It's going to go somewhere in DC. Where does it fly out of LAX? Does it fly out of Ontario? Do you drive down to San Diego? Does it land in
Mhm.
Dulles? Does it land in BWI? Which one's direct? If it were to like lay over in somewhere in the middle, that's a risk, right? These are all
Mhm.
things you have to factor into this. And people have all these heuristics. Everyone kind of does it differently. So no one's doing it to an optimum. That's part of the ethos of airspace, is that we should have machines do that. So one of the first things we wrote was a routing algorithm to figure out the most optimal way. And this thing, the first one, interestingly, before we introduced AI, was actually kind of a brute force multi-threaded thing. So I
Mhm.
knew it got to a time optimum. But we would go into these places, and like I said, this tech didn't exist. And I'd give a demo, and the first router took 90 seconds to run. 90 seconds. Can you imagine waiting 90 seconds for something? And and I had this big
Not
hand wavy
anymore. I mean,
speech.
what's upon a time? You're like, sure, yeah,
Yeah,
but now, no.
yeah, not anymore. I had this big hand wavy speech for what the system was doing when that was like spinning. And it returned. I had no idea if the guy was going to be like, that was too long or that was dumb. And he goes, this is going to change the world. I go, what? and he goes, that did it in 90 seconds. He goes, my team takes 30 minutes. I
Hmm.
was like, whoa, okay. And then he like cracks the door and he calls in his team. And he goes, hey, like pretty much like this nerd thinks his computer is smarter than you guys.
Yeah.
Calls in like 20 people. And these are like, freight ops people. So these are like big tough people. And they sit around and they just start barking addresses at me. And I plug in the addresses and I run it, and we wait, and I give the hand wavy speech, and then they give me another one. And then one guy starts challenging me and is like, hey, that I would never fly into BWI or some airport like that. And I was like, well, it's the fastest. He goes, no, it's not. And he goes like, Dulles would be faster or something like that. And I I look and I math out the difference, and he was wrong by like 15 minutes because there was an accident.
Oh,
So like traffic, like literally
yeah.
was the difference, and everyone was like, "Oh!" and in that moment, like that kind of closed the deal, where people started to believe that computers could do this.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
that was really when we kind of realized we had product market fit. It was when like the end users of these companies that were all doing it on paper were like, "Whoa, like this is something that I need."
So now with, the implied story here though is that this is replacing that team, right? We'll be replacing those jobs. Did you get any pushback or disruption?
Kind of like, even though like maybe there is some like they could use like maybe less people, for the
Hmm.
most part it's just better tooling for these people, because like this is an emotional thing you know
Right.
the last thing we're ever going to build is like a chatbot or a telephony thing that tells people where their organs are, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
humans need to talk to these humans, and there's problem solving involved. But the tooling they use, if that is the absolute best tooling, you get better outcomes. So for the
Right.
most
Right.
part, I think it's more better tooling. Think about
Yeah.
like the invention of Excel for accountants. It didn't
Hmm.
it didn't replace accountants. It just gave them better tooling. Everyone thought it was going to replace the accountant. It made more accountants, right?
Yeah.
Because now
Yeah.
anyone could do it. That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. It increases
Now,
the size of the market. That's
yeah,
interesting.
now
Yeah.
more things can fly time critical because you're not calculating by hand. It's not this like Hail Mary where you hope it works.
Hmm. So you were saying you did all this brute force before you implemented AI. I imagine there was quite a long time between those two. But what's the kind of the technology journey as this thing advanced from brute force to ultimately where you are today?
Yeah, it was a couple years, and I always hated the fact that the brute force took so long.
Hmm.
But that wasn't the big problem. The big problem was, I ended up getting kind of good at the hand wavy speeches, right? So we'd go in, that thing would happen again. I'm starting to get confident,
Yeah, yeah.
and then the system returns, and this person says, "Cool, but I would never take that route." I go, "This is the most time optimal route," and he goes, "Yeah, but like." Everything we ship is for surgery next morning. So don't charge me an extra, or don't drive an extra 80 miles out of the way. If it's going to save me 5 hours, I need it for the next morning. Give me like the best same day option. And I was like, "Ugh, okay, well, let me do this graph traversal with another optimization." So we rewrite it to do both. Now there's like a toggle. And I'm like, okay, I'm never touching that thing again. And then you would get people that would say, okay, I want you to fly it Monday through Friday, but drive it on the weekends because there's less traffic and that's a little bit more reliable than the airlines. Or they've been, let's say, jilted by American Airlines or something. And they're like, fly it as long as it doesn't go through their hub. Or Delta, fly it as long as it's not Delta going through Atlanta. So each customer had their own set of preferences that
Hmm.
maybe were rational or maybe were not rational, right? For instance,
Hmm.
like you can't treat an organ for transplant the same as a part for a downed aircraft. There's just different plane types and packaging required. So I was like, we're gonna have a giant config file for every single customer, and that's gonna be insane. Or I should just delete this router. Instead, we'll take something in that says we're working on it, and then a human will do it. And that was almost our reality. And then we ended up talking to one of our engineers, and he said, I think I can do this whole thing in neural networks. So we ended up introducing the algorithm, wide and deep neural nets, that is kind of the same way that like Google Play recommends apps or Netflix recommends shows.
Hmm.
And what we do is we run the graph traversal, we get all the possible options, and then we score each one to be the least likely that ops a human would change it. And that gets better and better over time.
Hmm.
So it lets you zero shot these really complicated shipments where you've never actually seen that shipment before, but it's kind of like this other shipment because of the deep learning part.
Hmm.
And then there's rules from the wide part, and that lets you ship things that the system has never seen before in an optimum way.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
I would say my first sort of production implementation of neural networks was kind of dumb and fun at the same time. So I worked at a startup doing, a music platform, basically on your phone, and we tried to come up with all of these interesting ways to find out what kind of music you like, what kind of music really motivates you, right? So just like you said, just any old algorithm, any recommendation algorithm. So like Pandora was big at the time, Spotify was pretty new, and they were all just pretty bad at recommending good music. But this was also the time that the Apple Watch had just come out. And so we actually, for the first time, we had real time heart rate data. And we could actually tell if a certain song elevated your heart rate.
Whoa.
So we used neural networks to basically identify not only that yes there that the heart rate is being elevated, but it's also not related to other things, right? Like if you're running
Running.
faster, so we
Yeah,
had to
yeah.
like cross reference it against your pace and other things that we could attribute it to the music itself. And then of course identifying, well, what are other songs that are like it, and there's some like kind of deep databases that classify music in a really very sophisticated way, where we could kind of say like, okay, it's not just you like this artist, another song by this artist. It's like, is there something about the tempo? Is it the certain instruments? Is it the tone of the voice? What is it about that song that actually gives you those kind of tingles? So there was a lot of data science that went into that. We ended up doing a study with UC San Diego even
Wow.
about this, of kind of just like performance aspects of music and kind of what elements of music drive performance. And they worked with like Olympic athletes and things like that. So we had like, yeah,
That's
we have
amazing.
people tied up on the treadmills with the heart rate sensors and the VO2, like basically running or doing things with different kinds of music. And then they would test, test what made them run faster or harder, that kind of thing.
It's
Yeah, it was
so
kind of
cool.
cool.
I want to be part of that study. I feel like I could probably name the songs that get my heart rate the most jacked, but now I'm
Yeah.
just curious, am I right?
Yeah. So then we even did we just made these, silly apps where it's like you're running in this app and you're like, give me a boost. So there'd be a boost button, like a
Yeah.
turbo button. So imagine you're like running a marathon or something. You hit the turbo button and it would pull out a song that it knew
Yeah.
would be like your power song,
Wait, that
and then
was
it would come on and you would just start
wasn't that part of
rolling.
Nike Run? Did they buy that tech? Because like I had a power song back in the day when I was like running.
Yeah, they try. So that it was at the same time as that.
Yeah,
They didn't do a good job.
got it. Yeah, because you had to
Yeah.
define your power song. You just
Right.
like
Yeah,
set.
exactly. Yeah, you just kind of said like these are my favorites, right? Or
Yeah,
just kind of did it the old-fashioned way, but this was
yeah,
actually like and then you'd hit it and the song would come on and we also would analyze the waveform to see like when the peak was,
yeah,
right? Because we didn't want to start at the very beginning and roll through the whole. We wanted to come right in when it was about to drop or, when it really when the peak heart rate was.
yeah.
And then you'd go and then it would measure it, of course, and it would be like, did it work? Did it not work? So because songs get played out too, so
True.
you can have a power song, you might do it 5 times and then we got to come up with something different. So
Yeah, man, I love
anyway.
that. That's the coolest. It's the coolest implementation of neural nets.
Totally low stakes, right? Like just for fun, but yeah, so similar kind of challenge.
I love it.
Okay, digress. So you're building this tech. You implemented the neural nets. So from that point on, um, did you keep getting these crazy requests, or did people finally take it for what it is?
We did. Yeah, we kept getting crazy requests. The cool thing was that instead of being like, okay, let's rewrite some code, we just said, don't worry, like ship, if it gets it wrong, the operational team will correct it based on your SOP, and then it'll just start getting it right because it
Hmm.
learns. So that's what this is the most beautiful application of machine learning. And like, this was well before LLMs, right? when
Yeah,
when
yeah.
people started getting really excited about machine learning. And I was just so jacked on neural nets for so long just because they were saving us so much time and
Mhm.
letting customers do things that were never ever possible.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, still to this day, right? I mean, so people don't realize that LLMs are just neural. It is just machine learning. It's just statistics running under the hood, just doing it very, very fast and in a widely parallel way. But
Right. Yeah, they're
for anyone who's,
transformers.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. It's
Yeah,
just a probability of what the next right thing would be. And if you
totally.
cuss at it and say you're an idiot, then it'll learn that not to do that next time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so while this is all happening, right? So while the technology was evolving and your company's growing, I imagine your team is growing as well, right? So tell me
Yep.
about that journey. Tell me that side of the story about how your company grew and some of the growing pains that you had to deal with.
Oh man, growing from zero was one of the best things like I've ever had to go through. It was
Hmm.
so hard and so rewarding. But yeah, you're dealing with a new problem every 6 months, it seems, because your company is literally a different company every 6 months when you're going from, one or two people to 50 people to 100.
Hmm.
So I kind of joked about this on one of the panels, but like you're constantly kind of putting yourself out of a job. So when it's just you, you're the programmer, right? And then you
Hmm.
hire a couple other people, then you're lead programmer, then you hire more, then you are like the project manager, you know? And then you hire a project manager, now you're the product owner. And you just keep going. At some point, you're QA. At some point, you become the data science team. Then you hire a data science team.
Hmm.
So you're just getting things to a point where you feel a lot of pain doing it, and then you put a person there who can do it better than you ever thought you possibly could have. They do an
Hmm.
amazing job, and then you're on to the next problem that you're handling on your own. You feel the pain, you do the same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of it. It's you just slowly move on to the next problem until you have a full-fledged team.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I experienced that a lot myself, and obviously, all my coaching clients as well. It's about reinventing yourself, like you said, about every 6 to 12 months. And the challenge that so many founders deal with is that they think they're great at everything, and so they don't want to give it up or don't trust people.
Yeah,
But what they don't realize is that, yeah, you might be great at everything if you could focus on just that one thing,
yeah,
but that's not what the company needs you to do. They need you to cover everything. And so you end up sucking at everything,
Right.
even though you could be really good at it, and don't end up not getting out of people's way. So,
Right.
did you ever experience that? Anything where you kind of maybe held on to something longer than you should have?
Oh, I'm sure. So when I really kind of stopped coding on the production trunk line, it was because like I was blocking the deploy and I didn't have time to fix it.
Mm. Hmm.
So no, there are
Hmm.
problems with the deploy pipeline that shouldn't happen anyway, right? But like
Yeah.
at that point, I realized that like I was hanging on to trying to be an engineer too long, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the CTO role is pretty peculiar in this way, in that the CTO will often hang on to the engineering responsibilities much longer than in other departments, because it's how we got here. We love it. We
Yeah.
don't want to stop doing it. We feel like having to deal with people is a lot more difficult and unrewarding, and so we often will get stuck in that engineering mode. But then there's nobody taking care of the team. There's nobody growing the team. There's nobody elevating the processes. So what do? We hire a VP of engineering and say, okay, that's your responsibility now. I'm going to go off in a cave and work on R&D. But that doesn't, well, let's just say it comes with a lot of serious trade-offs. So a lot of the work that I do as a CTO coach specifically is about elevating and maturing that role from, the, like you said, the IC to the principal to the lead to the manager to a true C-level executive. The other thing we don't realize is that there comes a certain stage, and I'm sure you're at that now, where engineering is way out in the lead in terms of the ability to scale because we've been using technology since day one. Now all the other departments at the company need our help because they're still stuck on spreadsheets and old tools.
Yeah.
So we end up having to become like consultants to the other departments, you
Right.
know?
It's so funny. I mean, not even inside of airspace, but just in general, someone will be like, "Oh, I've got this horrible problem at work," and they'll be describing it, and I'm like, "You just need Kanban."
Yeah.
You know, and like, and,
Yeah.
and they're like, "What's Kanban?" I'm like, "Let me tell you, and here's a book."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
engineering is kind of one of those weird things where like, yeah, you can get a degree in computer science, learn how to code, but you can actually get a degree in software engineering and learn about like organizational teamwork and ways of working and shipping projects and what that means in terms of maintenance. And it's such a mature field that I feel blessed to have been in it because it lets me be effective, kind of even outside of an R&D org.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it is true. I mean, I think because we are like relentless, sometimes autistic optimizers,
Yeah,
that we've gotten so into, save for maybe, manufacturing, right? At least in the tech world, or in the departments within a technology company, the engineers are the ones that have, nailed process and process improvement, whereas other departments, lag behind because they don't have the operational DNA. And again, but they need it. And for the organization to grow, right, so that you don't create these other bottlenecks, the CTO needs to be able to consult and leverage technology in these other areas too. And again, when you're stuck in the code focusing on the product all day, you're not giving the company what it needs at that stage, which I imagine at the stage you're at now, you're probably driving technology across the whole organization, right? Not just diving into neural nets, which I'm sure you would love to do.
right. Yeah, we are. Man, one thing I'm so proud about with airspace is like how ingrained R&D is into the entire org. So
Hmm.
our the way our operations team is scheduled, so we have a 24-hour operations team across the globe. So when you call airspace, someone will answer no matter when, right? And
Wow.
that is actually really, really hard to schedule. These people need vacation. They, get sick. Demand changes over time. So like if you plot our demand, you can really see days and weekends and holidays and all that stuff. And we need staff to it if we want to be optimal. Almost everybody else just like throws bodies at it and hopes
Hmm.
they're right. And when they're understaffed, those people are stressed out. Sorry about it. And when they're overstaffed, the company loses money. Sorry, they're doing the best they can.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was like, we can just do this better. So I had this like epiphany of how to do it. And my wife, we had like a newborn baby when she wanted to like go shopping. And I was like, okay, I'll go, but I have to stay at a coffee shop and work the entire time. And she was like, fine. So I made this scheduling algorithm. It was really a demand modeling thing, and then we were able to staff people to it. And truly, compared to what we have now, it was absolutely terrible. But
Yeah.
it worked when we had a small amount of people, and now our AI team runs it. And our AI team is actually what drives the scheduling at Airspace of people in our operations department. How cool is
Wow.
that?
Wow.
Yeah.
So wait, can it like predict when people are going to get sick and go on vacation and so on, or no?
It doesn't really predict when they get sick, but like, you can be very careful. It knows when they're going to be on vacation, and it
Mhm.
can, you know, like intentionally add extra resources around certain areas so that you're not like understaffed on accident, which is the big thing.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, again, perfect example, right? It's like customer success or sales or whatever, they need to run optimally the way engineering needs to run optimally. And
Hmm.
so, we have that operational brain, we have that technology discipline. We need to be bringing that to other departments. And there's a certain scale, I would say, kind of like Series B, right? Like 10 million or so, where it really becomes critical. But even earlier on, right? Like even to get to that level, um, we as CTOs need to be supporting our other leaders in the organization, and we can't do it if we can't delegate the day to day. And I guess that's kind of the only point that I'm trying to make here is that we all need to, as leaders, learn to delegate, learn how to, like you said, put ourselves out of a job every 6 months or so,
Yeah,
hire great people, and realize that yeah, while we could be the best at whatever we focus on, we're not doing anybody any services by trying to own everything.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. So what you talked about the company kind of transforming as you went through these different levels of scale. How did your leadership have to change as your company went from, like you said, a handful of people to 20 to 50 and so on?
I mean, I think you kind of touched on it, but like you just have to trust these people and give them autonomy and like just kind of like direction and let go. Like I
Mm,
try to just hire smart people, tell them what we're trying to do, and let them run.
hmm.
And we are so blessed with like a great mission. That's kind of all you need, like we don't have to
Hmm.
like whip people to do things because people want to make these things work.
Hmm.
So in the beginning, I was coding and reviewing pull requests and saying, nope, it's not gonna work that way. It needs to work like this. And if I try to do that now, like not only would I likely be wrong because these
Right.
people that have been here a long time are way closer to everything than me, but like it just doesn't scale up.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, I think trust is almost every process in engineering is in software engineering is like a proxy for trust,
Yeah.
in a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
ways. And when you've been working with people a long time and we've got a great tenured people here, we have a high degree of trust, and then we can be a little light on process, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a book right here on my bookshelf that I always recommend called The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey.
Oh yeah.
And it's exactly what you're talking about here. So basically, what it says is that all of management is just compensating for a lack of trust,
I totally agree with that, and I have not heard that before.
right? You think about it, right? So if you have trust, you don't have to second guess, you don't have to review performance metrics, and you don't have to spend all of this time in planning meetings and so on. You say, all right, you're the people, you've got the skills. We give you direction, we give you the strategy, we give you the tools and the resources, and you own it, right? And off you go.
Right.
Now, obviously, we don't want to trust people who haven't earned that trust, and there's chapters on all of those facts. I won't go into the book, but um, we should, as leaders, we should be driving towards like trust is a requirement for being in the role.
Hmm.
I have to be able to trust you because I have to go work on other things, and I don't have time to second guess you and to give you a ton of oversight.
Totally.
But that being said, it means, okay, well, how do we actually create that environment of trust? Well, there's something called the trust equation, which actually comes from a different book, which is on a different shelf.
Hmm.
So it talks about credibility, reliability, um, orientation, kind of self versus group orientation, and oh gosh, what was the other one? Okay, I'll let me talk about it for a second. I'll remember as I go through. So credibility ones is like, do you know what you're doing? Can you do the job?
Yeah.
Do you have the skills? Do you have the experience? Reliability is if I ask, do you mean what you say and say what you do? If I ask you to do something, do you follow through on it, right? The orientation aspect of it is, do I get the sense that you're here for the cause, that you're here for the team, or that you're in it for yourself, right? And the fourth one here, I'm just gonna look it up because it's escaping me right now. It is intimacy. That's
Hmm.
the one. Um, do I know you? Do I feel like I know you as a person? Right? Do I feel like I can be vulnerable with you? Can I give you feedback? Are you giving me feedback? Or are you cagey? Or are you hiding something? Or feel like you're, not being fully honest? Right? So those are kind of like the four main variables that go into it. And so so then you can identify any problem as a manager, right? Any problem that you're having with somebody as a lack of trust. So you can actually just say, well, which one of those four variables is happening here? Do I feel like they don't have the skills? Okay, there's things that I can do to improve their skills, or to have them, to challenge them to improve their skills. Is it about reliability? Do I not feel like if I give this person something, they're going to follow through? Okay, well, we can focus on that, right? The orientation piece. So orientation and intimacy are the ones that are on kind of the softer side. So it's a little bit harder to say that there's a clear, process for doing it. It's like, well, I don't want to say you either have it or you don't. I'd say intimacy is something that you can kind of develop over time, but the orientation piece, it is a bit more of a selection thing. So what you're saying is like, in your company, we're selecting for people who crave that pressure, who want to work in a high stakes business, and who are willing to, to put in the work to, to do something that isn't for most people. You have to be all in. You have to be committed to the cause in order to be part of an organization. And not to say that that can't be coached or can't be led, but it's definitely something I think to select for rather than to try to train. So anyway, another digression here, but yeah, I'm right there with you.
I love it. That was beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
would trust every single person on my team to do a job better than I would ever do it. And that
Wow.
feels so, so good. And a lot of times when I hear people talk about how stressed they are at work, they tell me a little bit about what's going on. And you realize they just don't trust their team. They just
Hmm.
don't trust their people, you know?
Yep.
And to your
Yep.
point, that's probably either they haven't been trained or coached, or they just have the wrong people, you know? And
Yep.
I feel very blessed to have the people that I have.
Wow. So let me ask you, have you heard of the founder mode meme that's been going around the startup ecosystem lately?
No, I'm now
No.
nervous about it though.
Yeah, yeah. So okay, so Paul Graham, Y
He's
Combinator,
the best.
published this essay talking about founder mode versus manager mode, and it's kind of taken off like wildfire in the founder community. And as soon as I read it, I was like, "Oh God, this is going to end terribly." So, what it basically is it's a manifesto on why founders should micromanage everybody. And I
What?
was like, God, no, don't do it. Uh, so what he did is, so Paul Graham is in this like upper echelon, and he's meeting with the absolute unicorns of the world, right?
Yeah.
And he actually wrote the essay about the founders of Airbnb,
Okay.
and was talking about like an interview that he'd had with the founders of Airbnb where they were getting advice at certain levels at scale by typically investors saying, it's you need to delegate now. You need to hire people and you need to delegate. You need to let go and get out of the weeds. And they didn't. They resisted it. They hung on. They were, obsessed over every aspect of the business. And they say, oh, well, look at them now. They're this huge company. And it's a major survivorship bias for one thing,
Hmm.
but it's also, there's a fraction of a percent of companies that actually make it that big. And that model does not work for every company. And he also brought back like Steve Jobs. And I swear to God, my entire life, I'm going to be confronted with this mindset that founders have of like, well, Steve Jobs micromanaged, Steve Jobs obsessed with everything. No, Steve Jobs only obsessed over the aspects of the most important new developments at the company that needed to be perfect, right? So, like the design and the marketing and the branding of the iPhone or the iPad, right? The newest model, or the newest thing. He wasn't micromanaging all the other legacy businesses, right? Like when the iPhone came out, he wasn't in the room micromanaging the iMac or whatever. he was focused on the tip of the spear of innovation, right? And so everybody says, well, I've got to absolutely be micromanaging everything and telling everybody what they should build and even telling the customers what they want and what they should buy. And I always just respond to that as like, are you Steve Jobs? Would you want to be? He was a total psychopath. Everybody hated working for him. He was estranged from his family, and he died from a totally preventable disease because he didn't trust his doctors. Like, is that who you want to
Yeah.
be? More power to you. But so my response to this whole founder mode thing is, again, that we should stay connected and engaged to the parts of our business that need us most, right? Or that are, the most critical to our success. But for everything else, and as your company grows, there's going to be a lot of everything else. You've got to trust and delegate here. So kind of like, what's your take on that? And what advice would you give to other founders that are probably maybe latching on to this in a bit of a culty way, it seems?
I think those people that agree that they are the best to do everything either have not met many people, so they're really bad at interviewing, or they've
Right.
got an absolutely incredible ego that I can't even relate to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our VP of engineering, I just like he's so much better than me. He's so much
Yeah.
better than me, and like I'm so happy about that. Our head of product innovation runs our healthcare platform. So much better than me, you know.
Mm.
Like I just our global head of product that does all the international work. So much better. They have experiences and backgrounds that I don't have that lets them do their roles so much better. Um, it's how it should be. If you're really good at interviewing and finding people that are just amazing, there's no way you can possibly believe that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no way because the world is just so diverse and these problems are so specific. The idea that one person would be the best at everything is crazy.
Yeah.
Imagine like cooking with just a Swiss Army knife. How horrible would that be? You
Right.
know,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just use the tools that are best for the job and the people that are best for the job, and let yourself be surprised and amazed at what they can do.
Right.
I
Yeah.
our one of our first staff engineers, or our first staff engineer, just the most incredible engineer ever. If I tried to solve the problems that he tried that he has been working on, my solutions would not have been as good. And that's not
Yeah.
because I'm not a good engineer. I'm good.
Yeah.
He's better.
Wow.
and
Wow.
that's and that it's okay. You don't have to be the best at everything.
Yeah. So
Nor
it
should you.
sounds like if you think that you're so good at everything that you have to micromanage and can't trust your people, it sounds like what you really suck at is hiring.
Yes, that's what I think, yeah. And hiring, like, that's one thing that I have gained so much respect for. I've met people that are really, really, really good at hiring, and I've met
Mm.
people that are really, really, really bad at hiring.
Yeah.
And most people sit on the bad side of that spectrum because they never
Hmm.
thought it was a skill to be better, to get good
Hmm.
at.
Hmm.
And now I respect that so much as a skill, and I feel like I've become pretty good at hiring, and I think my team shows that.
Yeah. So I think it's especially CTOs, I think, have this problem, right? Because we're not the most people in the certainly in the C-suite,
Yeah,
and but we also overemphasize the credibility variable of that trust equation, right? We are all in focused on skills, right? Aptitude versus attitude. We don't focus on, again, the reliability, the intimacy, the self-orientation. I finally remember them all now. But the other side of this, which is really, can you work in a team? Are you a jerk? Do
yeah,
you take ownership? Can you stay focused? Are you good at time management? Are you good at communication? And these are things that are actually really hard to suss out in an interview. You can't just like ask questions and get a really reliable response. So um, it's probably a topic for another conversation. But I do a lot of work with all my clients on specifically around hiring, not just in the engineering space, but really just like how do you scale up hiring and make it top tier talent all along the way.
totally.
Um, but sounds like that's it. So as a founder, if you want to be 10x at something, get 10x at hiring and let those folks be 10x at every other role in the company.
Absolutely. And to your point, there are people that are going to succeed at one company and not another because of team dynamics and all that. And
Yeah.
that's another kind of famous problem. It's in every like tech book or leadership book of like, there's this engineer that's such a curmudgeon. He's so hard to work with. Like, what do
Right,
we
right.
do? You just
Yeah.
fire him. You know,
Yeah.
that's it. If he is making everyone's life miserable, it doesn't matter how smart he is or she
Yeah.
is. You
Yeah. Yeah.
just
Yeah.
fire him.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
Yeah. So, oh gosh. Okay, we're running out of time here, but so the last thing I want to dive into here. I work with so many different founders who I hate to say, like, I've become a lot more bullish on firing people, especially in the startup stage, than I ever used to be in my career. And this is coming from a coach, like as somebody whose job it is to fix people, to improve people, to believe that everybody can grow. But it takes time, and it takes a willingness and an eagerness and a commitment to do that. And in a startup, things just move too quickly for the wrong person to become the right person in that team. And so what I look at when it happened this morning. I had a client send me this long email about this person who isn't fitting. Um, you look at, like, is it a skill gap or is it a personality gap or a culture gap? If it's a skill gap, it's deterministic. You can say, all right, we can set a bar here, we can measure it, we can put goals in place, we can put a training plan in place. You set a time frame, you say, cool, you accomplish this and you perform at this level, or you're out, right? But if somebody's just a jerk and they just kill the vibe, or they're nasty, or worse, right, they're toxic, or they're harassing, or whatnot, there's nothing you can do or even should do as a manager or leader beyond, like, essentially an ultimatum. Don't ever do that again. Don't ever act that way again. And if they're not a fit, so that the problem that the founders get, though, is it's harder to justify firing somebody for being a jerk than it is to fire somebody for not performing or not doing the job. And the way I kind of describe it is like, there are certain instances where you should have evidence and data to support it, and there's certain where it's just, we can just kind of vote someone off the island. So if you ask everybody on the team, here's a few questions that if you're having somebody that isn't working out this way, you just say, um, do you feel good, or do you feel happy when this person walks in a room? Would you miss this person if they were gone? And would you hire this person again today? Just those three questions. I think it's called like the keeper test or something like that. There's somebody put a brand name on it, but
Right.
this that kind of thing. Does this person make you feel good when you work with them? Right? If they left, would you be really upset? And if they weren't here and you were bringing them in again, would you do it again today enthusiastically? And if the answer to those three questions isn't yes, then that's all the data you need. And obviously, you can kind of average it out and kind of see what the consensus is. But that's really as objective as it needs to be if somebody is just not a good culture fit, or again, just sort of mean.
I totally agree. Totally
Yeah.
agree. I mean, in engineering terms, it's like if your CI suite doesn't work, right? That
Hmm.
affects everyone. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? There's one
Yeah.
guy writing bad code, or your entire CI suite doesn't work. That the second one's worse. You know,
Right. Right.
it's like that one person who's a jerk is making everyone's life worse, and you just can't let that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, especially in the startup stage, but even at any scale, it's like everybody has to be driving forward in the same direction. Everybody has to be motivated, collaborate. There needs to be energy pushing this thing forward, because it's so hard building a successful startup,
Totally
right?
agree.
So we can't have any anchors. We can't have anybody pulling us back. We can't have anybody hurting the morale of the team. Um, Gotta
Yeah.
toss
Yeah,
them overboard.
you also like, I think it's actually really, damaging to people's mental health to be like,
Mhm.
"I just need to get to the sale. I just need to get it so my options are worth something," you know?
Right, right, right.
No,
Enduring the
no,
suffering.
you need
Yeah,
to enjoy every day. You need to make sure every day is good, and you need to play a part in making sure everyone else's day is good,
yeah.
and then it's all gonna take care of itself?
And even if it's super hard and it's super stressful, if you believe in the mission, if you believe in the cause, and you like your team,
Mhm.
you'll endure it together
Yeah,
happily.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we got to run. I know we went way over, but Ryan, it was so great to chat with you today. This was super fun. Thank you so much.
Pleasure was all mine. I'll be back anytime you want.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are a tech CEO or CTO and you're looking to go from chaos to clarity, for over 20 years, I've helped over 100 companies like OpenAI, Sony, Qualcomm, and Automatic develop market leading products, lead high performing teams, and raise a boatload of money. So, if you want to lead magnetically, scale smoothly, and fundraise effortlessly, go to chaos2clarity.io. I've got a ton of free resources and content to help you grow your business.